Shadow of the Gods is a book written by John Gwynne, I think it's pronounced, in 2021, and it got. Let me just step back. There we go. And it got nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Fantasy in 2021, and it currently stands at 4.3 out of 5 on Goodreads. It's pretty darn good, and the artwork, so epic. Like, it's so good. And it continues in the back with the dragon. Like, oh, it's so good. Huge respect to Marcus Winnie, and who did the illustration, and Becky Gayat, who did like the overall cover design. The only thing is, and it's not that intrusive for a book like this. It still has a a quote on the cover, which, given the backside, is filled with quotes. Did you really need it? Probably not, but it's fine. It's Anthony Ryan. He has written some amazing books himself. But yeah, this is set in a Norse mythology inspired world, and I am a huge sucker for that. So I was very much excited, and I cannot wait to get into it. So we already talked about the cover, so I feel like we should just get to part 1 of the book. There are 3 main stories we talk about here, so let's get through them one at a time. So first we'll talk about Orca, who is just like the mother of a family and the main character, and clearly has some PTSD. I love her. I think the story is so good. What I love most is how Torkil and Orca is trying to teach Breka, the son, to be a good person, and when they return from the Elting, they talk about what it means to be good and being smart. They're really trying to make sure that he grows up to be a great man and don't make the same mistakes as some of the other people have made. Also, them actually having like Vaesen as pets / workers is really fun, given in this world they're looked very down upon. The thing about Orca is the story feels a little weird. It feels a little funky here in the beginning, because I'm not quite sure where it's going, so it's also but I like it so far. I think it's really fun. Next one we'll talk about Varg, and his story is so far my least favorite, but I just think it's because nothing really has happened here in the first part, and we don't really know his motivations. But the fight against Half Troll is just spot on. That was so good, so interesting. I can only recommend it so much. It was so well written. And I expect to like him more as we get through the story. But right now, he's my least favorite. And let's get to Elvar. And Elvar's story is suffering a bit the same as Varg's. Given we don't really know her motivation for traveling, we don't really know what's going on or why anything is happening. But then again, we travel with the Sea Jarl, and we get a lot of action and excitement, and my monkey brain just goes, I like this. There's lots of excitement, we're on a ship, we learn about the world, I love it. I mean, I'm a sucker for a great exposition. If you can write exposition good, you got me all day. So yeah, that's what I like. I like Orca's story because it's more like the personal small one. I like Varg's because it elaborates a bit more on the world, and I like Elvar's because it really shows off the world. Now, let's talk about something fun. I need to go through my notes here. Something I've noticed is the naming convention. Everyone seems to have relatively normal names for the world, for Norse mythology-based world, except for our main characters like Elvar, Orca, and Varg. And let's talk about them. So, Orca is named after orcs, which in the Beowulf are just like ogres and goblins, while Elvar is literally just an elf. I think it's from Swedish. Now in Norse mythology, elves are actually underground creatures, kind of like fantasy dwarves. So they're more related to fantasy dwarves than the tree dwellers we see in D&D, a more classical Tolkien-esque fantasy. And Varg is named after Vargar, which is the species of wolf fenriels in Norse mythology. And a Vargar is often used to describe someone who is an outcast or who's been removed from society, basically, which, the Fenrir was, because he was tied up and away by Tyr and all the other gods. So it's the same thing. So maybe I do believe their names probably have some influence on what we should expect from them as characters. Now, let's talk about the world. Because the world is kind of interesting, because it takes place after Armageddon or the end of the world or whatever you want to call it, instead of taking place like before, as we usually tend to see in Norse mythology. Usually we have what do you call it again? Ragnarok. Yes, I'm good. So usually we have like things take place before Ragnarok, and then we get to Ragnarok, and then like the characters win, and we end the story here knowing that the future is going to be rebuilt, it's going to be good. This actually takes place after the Ragnarok, and we're trying to figure out like where are we in this world, and that's why everybody hates like the descendants of the gods. Something funny I want to discuss though quickly is Væsen is used to describe like the different creatures, the different mythological creatures there are. And in Danish, Væsen basically is pronounced Væsen, and it basically just means creature. Like, it's so accurate, it's perfect. But every time I read it, I'm just like, yeah, it's just a joke. But I like it. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change it. Anyways, let's get to part 2. Let's continue on with one story at a time, and let's start out with Orca again, you know. And so after the Alting thing, Orca and her family gets attacked, and she's the only survivor / non-captive. Well, we don't really know what happened to her son other than he got caught and captured. We don't know if he's alive or dead, and that's kind of her story now, is going to save her son. And we learn indirectly that she is probably one of the biggest badasses in the entire world due to the epic stash of equipment she got going. Like, damn girl, that's insane. So, when wanting to learn where Breaker was, she uses she uses the Tainted that a local Jarl on like you has, and the Tainted is basically a descendant of the guards. And she uses one of the Tainted to tell her and explain what's going on. And the entire scene is just so badass, how she storms into camp and just wipes the floor with everybody and gets out and saves those two like weird guy. And I love how called Leaf and Mort. And I love how they stay relevant to the story, not because they're interesting characters, but because they were such a huge part of the first with their dad that it would feel weird for them to not continue on being important. And I'm so excited to see how Orca is going to take on the kidnappers, and why all the kids were taken, because there were multiple kids taken, and especially how Queen Helka is part of it, because her warriors were in on it, and it was just so good. It was so impactful. Now let me scroll down here so I can read. Let's talk about Varg, and his story is kind of like Orca's, just on the slower side, and most of the time it's just him learning to be on a mercenary ship, learning to be part of the crew, learning how to fight. And honestly, I think that's fine. I didn't expect a lot of action the same way as we got from Orca, because then it would just be pow 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 pow, and it's too much. I honestly think getting some pow 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 and then okay, and then pow 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 and then okay, and then pow 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 again, pow pow pow, got you. But the section 2 ends with them getting on a mission, trying to figure out what happened to the people who got eaten, and they have to stop it. And I can't wait to learn what's actually going on and who's behind it. So let me just smoothly without not as smoothly as I thought. So Elvar's story is wild to me. So they capture this berserker and his family, and they sail to a quite mighty Jarl, who we learn is Elvar's father, and he lives in the body of a giant snake called Snekka, which is the snake god. And the drama that we get in this section is just chef's kiss. It's so good. Like, it's clear everybody wants her to stay, well, everybody in her family, and it's clear that she does not. And the reasons and the politics, it's so good. And also we learn where, what they call it, the Uspa, which is the world tree. And we learn we learn that one of the characters know where that is, so that's pretty cool and awesome, and I love it, and I can't wait to get there and see what happens. And even the story knows how amazing it is. And I don't mind it doing that. I don't mind the story going in your face like, this is amazing and you will love it. Because I love it. Alright. I am, however, quite glad that magic isn't like a thing everybody can do, and isn't as everyday as it would be in some other fantasy. But it's still quite everyday use, but that's okay. Yeah. I can't wait to read more. Oh, this is getting kind of obvious, right? I can't wait to read more because it's so awesome. The book is so interesting, it's so exciting, and I'm just pumping an excited. And yeah, this is probably for me on par with To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. Like, it's just that good. So let's just get to part 3. I think it's the final part. It is. Let's get to the rest of the book. I am not sure how much to spoil of the ending, so I'm gonna try and keep twists and plot points and all the most important things relatively spoiler free. But I am, however, gonna talk about things I like and dislike. So let's start out with Orca. And Orca's story started out a bit interesting. It started out almost boring to me, which is weird. Like, okay, not start, but this part almost felt boring until after the spiker. Like, my God, the twists and turns after that were so good. Like, but yeah, like, getting to that point were a bit boring, but just the actual ending of the book were just, I need the sequel right now. So Varric, his story is a little weird to me to talk about. So I love the character development he goes through, and the arc in general. And I think he'll only get better in the sequel. I feel like what we've done in this book is set him up to be a better character in the next book. Well, not better, but more interesting, because I think we only just scratched the surface of his character development. And that's fine, but it does feel a little weird. And then finally, Elvar's story. It was my favorite until the last 50-ish pages. Then the two others, actually, like both Varric and Orca's story, just became better. But that's okay, because that doesn't mean this is bad, because a 9 out of 10 and an 8 out of 10, the 9 is of course better, but the 8 out of 10 is still pretty darn good, so I think that's okay. What I really liked about Elvar's story was the amount of lore and world building that just got thrown in our face even at the end of the book. That was pretty wild. And she already had her character arc kinda when we went to her dad and all that, so we didn't really need it. So her character stayed pretty consistent. We did get a romance story going, but was it really romance or was it more just hard love making every minute we got time for it? I don't know. So yeah. So the ending here didn't really include much on any of the stories. It's just like, conclude, there we go. It didn't conclude much of the story, which is kind of weird, but it's also okay because we are literally setting up for a sequel. But again, we didn't finish, we just set it up, and it worked. It was pretty good, but it always feels weird when a book does that, because usually you wanted to finish a story like before you go to the sequel. You don't have to finish the main story, but you want to finish like a side story. Like, look at Harry Potter, how the first book, it didn't defeat Voldemort the second time, but it definitely finished the Quirrell storyline. And the sequel, we got the Chamber of Secrets got completed, but we still have Voldemort, and like, we finished the side story, but the main story still goes. But here we didn't even finish a side story. At least it didn't feel like that. And without getting anything away, I discussed in the start the names with the characters. Guess who was correct? They did matter. I'm not gonna tell you how. Gonna have to read the book. So, in conclusion, the book is amazing. It takes in great inspiration from Norse mythology, and it handles it really, really well, and with a lot of tact. And I know Norse mythology, I think it's technically considered a dead religion, even though there are some practitioners, but it handles it with tact for those followers, I believe at least. And I have never read a book where the stories of the main characters never crossed paths. But they didn't here. Well, technically in the end, but not really. And that was an interesting read. It wasn't bad, just very interesting. The book also was just one big setup for the next one. So you have to get in, like, remember, you don't have to remember, but it's definitely something that for some might be a turnoff. I think it was fine because the book is really, really well written, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. But should you read it? Yeah. Yes, you should. You should read it. Alright. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe.